This module deals with the reader and speaking directly to the reader as much as possible. One of the things we need to recognize about our readers is that they live in a very difficult environment. They're busy, they're stressed out, they're overwhelmed, and we need to make our communication to them as easy for them to decode as possible. In this module, we'll talk about some of the strategies to do this. Elements: hooking the reader or creating rapport, providing reasons for reading, explaining the relevance of information, and providing sufficient information so the reader can take the action requested. Hooking the reader means creating rapport. And rapport is to interpersonal communication what the phone line is to phoning. We have to tell the reader how this piece of writing fits into the reader's world. There has to be a commonality of connection. I like to talk about the notion of going to a dinner party and we don't know anyone there, and as we stand at the buffet table, the person next to us starts to talk with us. What would you imagine the conversation being like? Naturally, the person would talk to us about the hosts of the party. Or perhaps if the Bears won this morning, the Bears. Or the weather. In any event, it is a common element that we share, and that gives us the permission to have a conversation. Here's another example of rapport. On the left is a very cursory kind of statement, whereas on the right, the writer is giving the reader a lot of information, so the reader can go into his brain and figure out what the writer is talking about. That's the whole point of rapport, is to have some clarity about, we can develop even more sophisticated hooks for various audiences or readers that we have. And we do this by using the information we developed in the writer's decision form, using that as a guide. We hook the reader in several ways. First, we must speak to the reader's needs and concerns. But how do we do that? Well, we can ask questions that are on the reader's mind. If you look at some magazines on the magazine stand, you'll see that that's there. Also, as you check out articles on the web, you'll see a lot of times they open with a question that speaks to us as the reader. The second way is to tell a story that connects the reader to the material. So this is a method that the Wall Street Journal uses quite a bit. They'll start out with a opening like, Frank Jones was a long-haul driver, and he was getting tired of the demands put on him by the freight company. So this hooks us right away, because we're a company, we're probably concerned about our employees. Whereas if we're Frank Jones, or someone like him, be concerned with the information in the article. Finally, we can do this by speaking to the reader's needs and concerns, by telling information that directly deals with the reader's needs and concerns. Many of your commercials on TV or the web are of this type. They speak directly to the needs and concerns of the audience. Selecting which of these you want to pursue is an interesting issue, and it depends, of course, on your analysis of the reader. The more accurate and the more defined the analysis, the easier it will be to ask these questions and have them answered. Once we've hooked the reader, we must now make the reader aware of the payoff to reading the whole material, the whole article or email that we send. If there's no payoff, why should the reader continue reading? So that's an important element of our presentation of material. So we call that the reasons for reading. In other words, we want to provide the WIFMs for the reader. What's a WIFM? A WIFM is what's in it for me. So, very popular business term. We are looking for WIFMs. Now, my question is, where do you get a WIFM? The big surprise is that the reasons for reading are actually the answers to questions number 2 and 3 on the writer's decision sheet. So the needs and concerns are negative WIFMs. WIFMs are positive needs and concerns. You might imagine as you look at this picture here that there is a continuum from inaccurate to accurate, from tardy to timely, from poor quality to high quality, from superficial work to thoroughness. Now we incorporate the information we developed in the last few slides into an actual statement to be used in a piece of writing. Later on, we will provide specific strategies to increase accuracy, make sure you are timely, keep high quality high, and give your boss thorough work. As you can see, all the elements of the reasons for reading are incorporated here, and they promise the reader the information or the results that the reader is looking for. The question becomes, where do we place the benefits to the reader or the reasons for reading? In the chart below, you can see the arrangement of your material so that it is maximally effective. So after hooking the reader, in other words, getting the reader interested, the next point we want to make with the reader is, here's what you'll get if you keep reading this material. So that's where benefits to the reader come in. And then we put in the main idea, and then the overall formator. I know you don't know what a formator is at this point, but you will in a few sessions. This drawing shows the same information as in the previous chart, but puts all of the critical beginning stuff in the first paragraph. You'd be surprised how many first paragraphs are put together this way. One of the mysteries or investigations that you can do is to look at first paragraphs of articles on the web and articles in the magazines and see if they don't correspond to this outline. And if they do, they're probably doing a good job of reaching the reader. One of the things that you really need to do is to explain the relevance of your information. Many of us assume that the reader will know the relevance for several reasons. One, the reader shares our perspective. So for example, if the reader is a software designer, he or she will definitely know how to interpret what I'm presenting. The other reason is that the material is so obvious that the reader can't but help understand the relevance. Unfortunately, these things are not true. Readers misunderstand relevance all the time, and it's our job as the writer to make sure that we clarify the relevance. It is safest to assume that the reader does not understand the relevance of the information you are presenting. In other words, the reader does not know or see the connection of the information within the piece of writing that you're sending. Simply because relevance seems obvious to you, the writer, don't assume it is obvious to the reader. Readers often interpret information, and our job is to forestall misunderstanding by clarifying the relevance, letting the reader know how this fits with what is being presented. Providing enough information for the reader to be able to take the action requested is critical and important. If we send out an email requesting that people attend the place for a party, if we fail to tell where that is and when that is, the reader will not be able to come. So it is important to know what information is critical for the reader to receive and to make sure that information is contained in the communication. I call this situation of trying to decide how much information to include as a thorough versus sufficient dilemma. We can spend our time and writing absolutely detailed and every possible piece of information into a document, but our reader will soon be overwhelmed or bored, and it's best if we keep it short. Nonetheless, if we keep it short, we have to make some decisions about what to include. I can't tell you how many times I have nearly submitted a proposal, and when I thought about it, I realized that I didn't include some critical information for the reader to have so that he or she could act on my proposal. So it's a good moment to take a step before you send something and ask yourself, have you provided enough information for the reader to be able to take the action you want? In conclusion then, make sure you provide only the information that the reader needs to take the action requested and to motivate the reader to take the action. These are critical elements, otherwise it's very difficult for the reader to accomplish what you request. We took quite a journey in this module. We started with the idea of working on how to hook the reader so that the reader buys into what we want to say. Then we talked about how we needed to provide reasons for reading for the reader so that the reader continues reading all the way through our document. Finally, we went to explaining relevance of our material, make sure that the reader understands how all the material is relevant to our main purpose or main action. And finally, providing the reader with sufficient information to take the action you want. So this is also important.